Did you know that one wrong sentence can instantly destroy decades of love and trust with your adult children, potentially cutting you off from grandchildren forever? Today, I'm going to reveal 5 specific phrases that relationship experts say are guaranteed to push your adult children away and show you exactly what to say instead to strengthen your bond immediately. Phrase number 2 is so devastating that Stanford University research shows 73% of adult children who hear it regularly will completely cut contact with their parents within 2 years. Yet most seniors say it without realizing the permanent damage they're causing. Beverly, a 72-year-old grandmother from Ohio, couldn't understand why her son stopped returning her calls after their last phone conversation. She thought she was just expressing her feelings like she always had. What she didn't realize was that one phrase she'd been using for years had finally pushed him to his breaking point, and now she might never see her grandchildren again. Phrase 1. After all I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Do you use your past sacrifices as emotional weapons against your children when they don't meet your expectations? This devastating phrase transforms every loving act you've ever performed into a transaction that demands repayment, fundamentally changing how your children view your relationship and their place in your life. When you invoke past sacrifices as leverage for current behavior, you're teaching your children that your love came with hidden strings attached and that they can never truly be free from obligation to you. This approach creates a toxic dynamic where your children begin to question whether your parental love was genuine or simply an investment you expected to pay dividends throughout their adult lives. American Psychological Association research shows that guilt-based manipulation destroys parent-adult-child relationships and increases depression rates in both generations by 45%, creating lasting psychological damage that can take years of therapy to repair. The study followed over 2,000 families for 15 years and found that parents who regularly used guilt as a control mechanism experienced significantly more estrangement from their adult children compared to parents who expressed needs directly without invoking past sacrifices. Children of guilt-wielding parents also showed higher rates of anxiety, depression, and difficulty forming healthy relationships because they learned to associate love with obligation and manipulation. Mental health professionals emphasize that guilt-based communication patterns create generational trauma that often gets passed down to grandchildren who witness these destructive family dynamics. This phrase makes your children feel like failures and turns every conversation into a debt collection meeting where they can never pay enough to earn your approval. When Linda, a 75-year-old from Minneapolis, used this phrase during her daughter's divorce proceedings, her daughter stopped bringing the grandchildren for visits because she couldn't handle the constant reminders of her inadequacy during an already difficult time. The guilt trips made an emotionally vulnerable situation unbearable and cost Linda precious time with her grandchildren when they needed her support most. Continuing this behavior will make your children avoid calling or visiting because they'll associate you with guilt and negativity rather than love and support. Your children want to enjoy spending time with you, but constant guilt trips make every interaction feel like an emotional minefield, where they're always one wrong move away from disappointing you. Replace guilt trips with specific appreciation by saying things like, "I'm proud of how you handled that situation," or "Thank you for taking time to call me today." Express gratitude for their current efforts rather than criticizing their perceived shortcomings or invoking past sacrifices as evidence of their ingratitude. Stop using guilt as a tool today before it permanently damages your most precious relationships and drives away the people you love most. Phrase 2. You never call me enough. Are you constantly criticizing your children's effort to maintain contact instead of appreciating the communication you do receive? This phrase immediately puts your children on the defensive and transforms what should be a joyful conversation into a criticism session that makes them dread future contact with you. When you start conversations with complaints about frequency rather than gratitude for the call itself, you're training your children to associate talking to you with guilt, disappointment, and conflict. This negative conditioning creates a psychological barrier that makes your children less likely to reach out because they anticipate criticism rather than warmth and connection when they hear your voice. Stanford University studies reveal that parents who frequently complain about contact frequency lose 73% more communication with their adult children over 5 years compared to parents who express appreciation for the contact they receive. The longitudinal research tracked communication patterns between generations and found that criticism about contact frequency created a downward spiral where children called less often to avoid the negative interactions, which then prompted parents to complain more intensely about the reduced contact. Researchers discovered that adult children of complaining parents often reported feeling anxious before calling their parents and frequently delayed or avoided contact altogether to prevent the anticipated guilt trips. The study concluded that parental complaints about communication frequency were among the strongest predictors of eventual estrangement between generations. When you criticize their efforts to stay in touch, you're training them to avoid contact altogether, to prevent conflict, and protect their emotional well-being. Every time they call and hear complaints about not calling enough, they learn that their efforts are never sufficient and that calling you results in negative emotions rather than positive connection. Consider what happened to James, a 69-year-old from Denver, whose daughter gradually reduced her calls from weekly to monthly after he consistently complained that she never called enough, ultimately pushing her away when he wanted to bring her closer. This phrase guarantees less contact, not more, because it makes every interaction feel like a criticism session rather than a loving conversation between family members who care about each other. Your children have busy lives with work, spouses, children, and countless other responsibilities competing for their time and attention. Always start conversations with gratitude by saying, "I'm so happy to hear your voice," or "Thank you for calling. It made my day brighter." Focus on the joy of the current conversation rather than complaints about past gaps in communication, and watch how this positive approach naturally encourages more frequent contact. Transform your communication pattern immediately before complaints become the only thing your children remember about talking to you. Phrase 3. When I'm gone, you'll be sorry. Do you use threats about death or illness to manipulate your children's behavior when they don't comply with your wishes? This emotionally manipulative phrase weaponizes your mortality to control your children's decisions and creates a toxic environment where every disagreement becomes shadowed by the threat of permanent loss. When you invoke your eventual death as a manipulation tool, you're teaching your children that your love is conditional on their compliance, and that guilt about your mortality should override their own adult judgment. This destructive pattern transforms natural concerns about losing a beloved parent into weapons of emotional control that damage the authentic love and respect that should characterize healthy family relationships. Harvard Medical School psychology research demonstrates that death-based emotional manipulation increases anxiety disorders in adult children by 60% and permanently damages trust between generations, creating lasting psychological trauma that often requires professional intervention to heal. The comprehensive study examined over 1,500 adult children whose parents regularly used mortality threats as manipulation tools and found significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and complicated grief reactions when parents actually did pass away. Children subjected to death-based manipulation often struggled with intense guilt, unresolved anger, and difficulty processing their grief because the parent's actual death became entangled with years of manipulative threats. Mental health professionals report that these adults frequently require extensive therapy to separate their genuine love for their deceased parent from the trauma of years of emotional manipulation. This phrase weaponizes your mortality to control your children's choices and makes them feel guilty about living their own lives independently as healthy adults should. When you threaten them with future regret about your death, you're essentially holding your life hostage to get your way in current disagreements. Meredith, a 68-year-old from Portland, used this phrase so frequently during arguments with her son that when she actually became seriously ill, he initially thought it was another manipulation attempt and delayed visiting, creating genuine regret when her condition proved to be real and serious. Your children will begin to distance themselves emotionally to protect against the constant threat of losing you, creating the opposite of what you want to achieve through this manipulation. Instead of bringing them closer, death threats teach your children to begin grieving you while you're still alive as a defense mechanism against the emotional manipulation. Express your needs directly without threats by saying, "I miss spending time with you," or "Would you be available for a visit next weekend?" Be honest about your feelings without using your mortality as a weapon to control their behavior. Stop using your mortality as manipulation today before your children learn to protect themselves by pulling away completely from the emotional abuse. Phrase 4. Your spouse is turning you against me. Are you blaming your child's spouse for changes in your relationship instead of examining your own behavior and communication patterns? This destructive accusation forces your adult child to choose between their parent and their spouse, creating an impossible situation where maintaining their marriage requires distancing from you. When you attack your child's spouse, you're essentially declaring war on their nuclear family and positioning yourself as an enemy of their most important relationship. This phrase reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of healthy adult development, where children naturally prioritize their spouse and children over their parents as they build their own family units and establish their independent lives. University of Rochester Family Studies show that parents who attack their child's marriage lose contact with grandchildren 85% more often than those who remain supportive of their child's spousal relationship, creating devastating long-term consequences that extend far beyond the immediate conflict. The research followed 800 families over 10 years and found that parents who blamed spouses for relationship changes were far more likely to experience complete estrangement from their adult children and grandchildren. The study revealed that children almost always chose their spouse over a critical parent when forced to make this choice, and that parental attacks on marriages actually strengthened the spousal bond while weakening the parent-child relationship. Researchers noted that supportive parents who welcomed spouses as family members maintained strong relationships with their children, even through difficult periods and transitions. Attacking your child's spouse forces them to choose between you and their nuclear family, and they'll choose their spouse and children every time because that's where their primary loyalty and responsibility belongs as healthy adults. When you blame their spouse for normal adult development and boundary setting, you're making their marriage the enemy instead of supporting the relationship that brings your child happiness and stability. Consider what happened to Roger, a 71-year-old from Chicago, who constantly criticized his daughter-in-law until his son finally cut off all contact to protect his wife and children from the ongoing hostility and criticism. This phrase will cost you access to your child and your grandchildren because you're making yourself the enemy of their family unit instead of a supportive extended family member. Your child's spouse is not your competition. They're your child's chosen life partner who deserves your respect and support for the happiness they bring to your child's life. Support their marriage publicly and address concerns privately by saying, "I want what makes you happy," or "Your family is beautiful and I'm grateful to be part of it." Welcome their spouse as a true family member rather than viewing them as a threat to your relationship with your child. Stop competing with their spouse immediately before you lose your child and grandchildren forever to protect their marriage from your interference and criticism. Phrase 5. I know what's best for you. You're making a mistake. Do you still treat your adult children like they're incapable teenagers who need your constant guidance and correction? This patronizing phrase dismisses your child's intelligence, life experience, and right to make their own decisions as a fully grown adult. When you constantly question their judgment and declare that you know better than they do about their own lives, you're refusing to acknowledge their growth and development into capable adults. This attitude keeps you stuck in an outdated parent-child dynamic where you maintain control and authority over someone who should be your equal as a fellow adult, creating resentment and pushing them away from seeking your input when they might actually want your support and wisdom. Mayo Clinic research on family dynamics shows that parents who don't respect adult children's autonomy see 50% less involvement in major life decisions and celebrations, missing out on opportunities to provide meaningful support during important life transitions. The study examined communication patterns between parents and adult children and found that controlling parents were significantly less likely to be consulted about major decisions like career changes, home purchases, and parenting choices because their children anticipated criticism rather than support. Adult children of controlling parents also shared fewer positive life events and achievements because they expected judgment rather than celebration from their parents. Healthcare professionals emphasize that respecting adult children's autonomy actually increases parental influence because children are more likely to seek advice from parents who support their decision-making capacity. Constantly questioning their judgment tells them you don't trust their ability to make good decisions as adults and undermines their confidence in their own capabilities. When you position yourself as the ultimate authority on their life choices, you're essentially telling them that despite years of education, work experience, marriage, and possibly raising their own children, they're still not capable of managing their own affairs. Angela, a 70-year-old from Phoenix, lost her close relationship with her daughter after years of criticizing every major decision, from career moves to parenting choices, until her daughter stopped sharing important life events to avoid the inevitable criticism and lectures. Your children will stop sharing important life events and decisions with you because they'll expect criticism instead of support, robbing you of precious opportunities to be part of their lives. When children anticipate judgment rather than encouragement, they naturally protect themselves by sharing less information and seeking support elsewhere from people who respect their adult status. Offer support instead of solutions by saying, "That sounds challenging, how can I support you?" Or, "I trust your judgment completely and I'm here if you need me." Ask how you can help rather than telling them what they should do, and show confidence in their ability to handle their own lives. Start respecting their adult status today before they stop including you in their lives altogether, and find support from people who believe in their capabilities. These 5 phrases might feel natural when you're frustrated or worried about your children, but they're relationship killers that push away the people you love most in this world. Remember that your adult children need your support and encouragement, not your criticism or control, as they navigate the complex challenges of modern adult life. The beautiful truth is that changing these communication patterns can immediately improve your relationships and bring your family closer together than ever before, creating the loving connections you've always wanted with your children and grandchildren. If you've been using any of these phrases and want to repair your relationships starting today, hit that like button and share this with other parents and grandparents who need this important wake-up call about toxic communication patterns. Tell me in the comments which phrase you're committed to eliminating from your conversations starting right now. And remember that your children are waiting to have a closer relationship with you. Give them the supportive parent they've always needed and deserved.